Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
The single best idea, and we will keep it short today. I'm sure you're as overwhelmed by the news flow as I am. Basically, the team has been working since 1 a.m. this morning, particularly on the horrific fires in Los Angeles, but on many other stories as well. I've learned more about Greenland in the last 18 hours than I knew in my entire life. If you took Greenland, and, you know, with the Mercator maps, it's distorted massively being up so far in latitude. Greenland is if you were at the border of North Dakota, Minnesota, and Canada, way up north. It would stretch down just past Monterrey, Mexico. That's how long it is. It's like 1,800 miles long. So there's a lot of Greenland. I'm learning things like that. All of that pushed aside yesterday by Craig Moffett, hugely esteemed at Sanford Bernstein, and with Moffett Nathanson, they're just iconic in media coverage. I had tipped to Rich Greenfield on that as well. But Craig Moffett coming out with all of his sort of interior work on companies and putting a sell on Apple. Here, Craig Moffett of Moffett Nathanson.
There was this narrative over the past couple of months, particularly into the last couple of weeks of last year in 24, where everyone was talking about the fact that Apple was, quote unquote, melting up in the face of no news. In fact, there was actually quite a bit of news, and it was bad, or at least sobering and concerning news. Obviously, the risk of retaliatory tariffs, but more saliently, over the last couple of months, you've had the judge in the Google antitrust case say that the payments that Google makes to Apple for search, which, remember, that's 25% of Apple's operating income, are patently illegal. Now, we don't know how those will change, but there's obviously a risk that they do. That ought to be reflected in the multiple. And then there's real deterioration in China and some obvious concerns that with China, the Chinese government is obviously not going to allow Western large language models to answer questions in China. One more thing, there are real concerns about whether AI is going to drive the kind of upgrade cycle that seems to be discounted in the stock.
Right.
We're pretty skeptical. But Apple's not broken. It's the valuation that's broken.
Craig Moffett of Moffett Nathanson there. And, of course, there's people that go the other way. That's what we like, the opinion on Bloomberg Surveillance on a given stock or on the market. There's also opinion on the Federal Reserve, and it helps sometimes to go to leading academics, and particularly those with a tenure of duty at the Fed. Richard Clarida is the former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve System, and far more riding herd at Columbia University in their Department of Economics. We went granular on the edge of Paul Krugman with his Friday, I should say, on the show, but we went granular on the dynamics, the price theory, the microeconomics of tariffs. Here, Richard Clarida on the economics of tariffs.
The revenue that the government raises is more than offset by the losses to consumers and producers relative to their ability to either consume goods or produce goods. And so that's the deadweight loss in simplest terms. By
definition, it's a lose game. That's
with the important proviso that almost any tax that raises revenue generates some sort of a loss, whether or not it's a consumption tax or investment tax. Again, it depends on how long they stay on. You know, one view is that you put tariffs on, countries basically then come to the negotiating table and then they come off. And so it's very importantly going to depend upon the detail of the tariffs, whether or not there's retaliation, and whether or not there is an end game. And really, without answering that, it's really hard to make an informed assessment.
A clinic with Richard Clarida, he went on to talk about lesser tariffs, lighter tariffs versus the magnitude of a larger tariff, and he put an x-axis on it. He said it also matters the time length of the tariffs as well. Just brilliant. We hope to see him maybe the end of January with the Fed decides. We're deciding to say thank you to Rob Carolyn. We have a treasured meteorologist, Rob Carolyn. He's been with us for decades, and I can't say enough about his coverage of the horrific fires in Los Angeles. We'll continue that coverage in the coming hours and days. Across the nation on your commute on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, Good morning on Sirius XM Channel 121, and in Washington, New York, and Boston as well. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts, and on YouTube Podcasts, this is Single Best Idea.